Phil about this? Because by saying a racial move, then you're calling Phil a racist.
I don't got a problem with that.
Do you think Phil was or is?
Oh, yeah.
I've got to be honest. The more I hear from this Scottie Pippen bourbon promotional tour, the less I like it. I backed up Scottie weeks ago when he made his point to GQ about the differences in KD and LeBron's style of play. Backed him up, right here on Stephen A's World, in fact. But this, saying Phil Jackson is a racist, doubling down on it, Scottie Pippen should be ashamed of himself. Let's be clear about something. That word has never been uttered about Phil Jackson before, not in his more than 40 years around the game as a player, a coach, or an executive. Not by Michael Jordan, not by Dennis Rodman, not by Shaq, not even by Kobe Bryant, who had a very, very complicated relationship with that man, Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson, if nothing else, was respected. I don't know. Maybe Scottie is sampling too much of his own product before these interviews. I don't know. But what he's saying is utterly ridiculous. And it doesn't just make him look foolish. It hurts all of us. Because when you throw accusations of racism around without any justification, without any receipts, and it gives oxygen and space to actual racists. Because people start to ignore incidents of actual racism. The fake blends in with the real until it all gets ignored. All this over a shot at the end of a game 27 years ago? All this because Scottie Pippen, for all his success, still clearly feels envious of Michael Jordan's status because he called Michael Jordan selfish. Remember that too, right? I'm going to say it again. Scottie Pippen should be ashamed of himself. I'll tell you what, this bourbon he's selling better be damn good if we have to put up with all of this nonsense. 27 years later, here you show up with a bad hairdo, by the way, going off, calling people racist. 27 years later? Please.
Stephen A., what's your reaction to Pippen's comments?
I respect Scottie, six-time champion, all-time great player. I think this is one of the stupidest, most idiotic things he's ever said or done. And you know, the way he looked in that interview, let me just say staying off the weed wouldn't be strong enough. And I'll leave it at that. If you go back, Scottie's got to recognize the fact that in this day and age, we have the tapes. We have the information. The game after that whole incident took place where Scottie Pippen refused to enter the game because Phil Jackson had drawn up a play for Tony Kukoc instead of Scottie Pippen back in the 90s, 1994, whenever it was. The day after, the next game rather, I believe the Chicago Bulls had won the game. When that transpired, Ahmad Rashad was interviewing Scottie Pippen on the court. Scottie Pippen said, "I've apologized to the team. I've apologized to Phil Jackson. It was stupidity on my part." There's video that you can find today, because I saw it, I have it. There's video where he's literally seen on video saying that to Ahmad Rashad. So now, all of these years later, 27 years later, Phil Jackson's a racist? The same Phil Jackson that coached you, that coached MJ, that coached guys like Bill Cartwright and B.J. Armstrong and others and Stacey King and all these guys. Same Phil Jackson that coached Michael, Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. Each and every single player at some point in time or another had issues with Phil Jackson. Kobe Bryant was on the record saying, yeah, man, he likes to coach through the media sometimes. It annoyed the hell out of Kobe. I always felt he betrayed Kobe when Phil Jackson came out with his book talking about how difficult it was to coach Kobe Bryant. But I would never, ever think to call Phil Jackson a racist. And I don't know any player, I repeat, any player who happens to be black that played for Phil Jackson that would call him a racist. And for Scottie Pippen to do something like that is just inexcusable. It really, really is. It's low. It's really, really low. 27 years later, if the man was a racist, why are we just hearing this from you after all these years? Why now?
I have a theory on that, Stephen A.
Okay.
You know,
Give me a theory.
This business that we're in, people can say part of that is selling hot takes. What's a hot take? A hot take is you thought about something, you come to a counterintuitive conclusion. You're like, I don't care if everyone else doesn't agree. I'm going to say it, right? That's a hot take. But
Does it involve you believing it, Max? Does it involve, do you believe it?
You believe it. You believe it, but you know it's hot because people, if you had to think about it for a while to say, actually, I think this is not what everyone thinks. That's different than a shock jock. Remember back in the day, growing up in New York, you had shock jocks on the radio. You knew they were intentionally saying stuff to shock people because that's how they sold advertising, right? You ask, why is Scottie Pippen saying this now? Stephen A., the only thing I can say, and I'm not saying, I don't know what Scottie Pippen really believes, but he's got a book coming out and he's got a bourbon out right now. And now he's making the rounds in media, saying things that you would expect from a shock jock. He's saying shocking things that maybe he believes them, maybe not, but I'm sure he probably believes what he says, I'd like to think, but he knows it's going to get attention, and he has two things that he's selling right now, and I just talked about them, his book and his bourbon, and maybe that's why now.
You know what, Max? That makes a lot of sense. I'm not going to disagree with you about that being a possibility. You may be totally, totally right. Let me say this as a black man. When you say racist, you better know what the hell you're talking about. And you better know who the hell you're talking about. This is a very dangerous time that we're living in, and it's more divisive than it's ever been as far as I'm concerned. Max, I can sit up there and talk about, okay, this is a racist act, or this resembles racist behavior. Notice how there's a dichotomy that exists. There's a line that's drawn in the sand before I character assassinate a person by calling them racist. Just because you white and you happen to disagree with me or make me unhappy or we don't vibe in terms of our thinking does not make you a racist. And as a black man, I think it's incredibly important that I say that. I don't view everybody that's white that disagrees with me or that's hurt my feelings or that I have a problem with as racist. I don't think that, and I don't think that Scottie Pippen should be playing for a man winning 6 championships, never uttered a word against Phil Jackson in all of those years he played for him. And then when Phil left the game and came back and went and coached the Lakers, and Scottie Pippen was on television giving analysis, never called them that. But 27 years later, again, when you may be trying to sell a book and a bourbon line or whatever it is, all of a sudden the man is racist. Now, Max, you know me, bro. I don't like Phil Jackson too much because of what he did to my Knicks. I still haven't forgiven that man for stealing money from the Knicks the way that he did, for sleeping on the damn job with his bad hips and everything else in between. Now, Phil Jackson, the coach, I love. Phil Jackson, the coach, I love. Phil Jackson, the coach that was interviewed, that's the 11-time champion, I love. My problem is that they weren't with the Knicks. I'm a Knicks fan. So to watch the job this man did with the Knicks is unconscionable, okay? And I have to sit up here and get away from my vitriol towards this man because of the job that he did for the Knicks, to come front and center and remember that I am a black man and a human being, and I'm looking at a white individual in Phil Jackson who has a history with the Knicks and had a lot of friends there, black and white, has friends throughout the league, black and white, and a lot of people think he's an a-hole. This is what they say about him too. You have friends and you have enemies. No one has called him a racist.
You know what else?
But Scottie Pippen just did. After 27 years. That's unconscionable. It really is.